activities which was happening at Berkeley in the 60s. And then I left Berkeley, went to New York to apprentice myself to a very visionary painter, sculptor, architect, a man named Frederick Kiesler. And I lived in his studio for 3 years, like a Renaissance apprenticeship. And I did everything for him. I did the paintings, I made the sculptures, I did everything. And the first couple of weeks I figured out to myself, why is he so famous? I'm doing all the damn work. And it took me about 2 minutes to realize I was a good mechanic. And once I realized I was a good mechanic, I let it all go, and it was like it was like graduate school. So I lived with him for 3 years until he died. And then because I was exposed to the rarefied New York art world, because of him, I could have stayed in New York and had all that access, but my heart was not there. And so I came back to California and began to get involved with, moved around the world a lot, but got involved with socially engaged work. And at that time, there was no language for it. It was just like, oh, this guy's doing political work, or he's doing something to sort of cause trouble or guerrilla actions. Now there's a language. As you moved into the academy now, there are people who get a degree in social practice. But for me, what that means is that the edges have been softened. There's no more, that roughness to it where people intervene in a situation. Now it's a social practice, and so it's acceptable. You can get a degree in that. And that still, even at this point in my life, bothers me, because it softens the edges. So that kind of, one more thing. My involvement with prisons was originally economics. When I was back in California, was trying to live as an artist, didn't have a job, of course, was doing everything, plumbing, carpentry, all that kind of stuff, which hard to do. But a friend of mine was working in San Quentin and invited me over one night to show some slides of my work. So I did that. And although I've mentioned this 100 times, I don't quite know what happened to me. I went there, and I'd been in jail when I was at Berkeley, but never, you all know the difference between prisons and jails, right? I'm assuming you all do. So I'd never been in a state prison before, and when I got there, I was scared, I was angry, I was even titillated, and I thought, I think I'll get a job here. And so I applied for a California Arts Council grant, and I got one, and I stayed there for 3 years doing that kind of work. And that experience profoundly changed my life. Changed the kind of work I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, and most importantly, the venue I wanted to put the work into. And that means, what would be the appropriate place to put this kind of work? So, for example, some of the maximum security pieces, which are on the wall there, I felt to myself, okay, I have to go to Texas, to Huntsville, Texas, which is the death penalty, at that time, was the death penalty capital of the world. They were executing, when Bush was governor there, 153 people a year. Now think about that for a moment. 153 people a year, not over his career, but a year. Okay, and I thought, okay, I have to do that. When I was working in San Quentin, I became a prison abolitionist, which I am to this day, which I believe that prisons should be abolished. I understand that people have to be held accountable for their behavior. I don't think you can walk down the street and knock somebody around and not be accountable. But prisons don't work. The abolitionists talk about the few. Maybe 10 or 15% of the few, which need to be separated from society and put in a safe and secure environment, which we don't have, and very few countries in the world have. In rural China, before Mao's time, I'm emphasizing that, there was a concept called bitter talk, and some of you might know about that. But what that was in the villages and small communities, and given the fact that China has a very, very strong familial structure, some social structure, people in the community would go to someone's house who had acted out and bitter talk. And the person's behavior would change. And so that was called bitter talk. And that interested me, that how could we bitter talk? So one question what I would leave you with as I move on when you go is what would your community look like? Literally look like, not feel like. I'm not interested in your feelings. Whenever I say that, my wife always says, Richard, feelings are important. I know they are. But what would your community actually look like visually if you did not have jail for people that broke the social contract? That's a question for you. What would they actually look? You ask a little kid that, they don't have a problem with it at all. They draw a little picket fence, they draw a house with a pitched roof, they draw a man and a woman holding hands, and a tree. That's what it looks like to them. Yeah, I've asked them. But you ask people who are more sophisticated, what would it look like if you didn't have the prison and jails? So, I'll point out some of the things which I did. This is a piece which I've always loved, actually. When I left San Quentin because the warden at that time, who I can't remember his name, it wasn't Warden Duffy, who was actually okay. But the warden at that time was saying, look at how great the prisons are, look at these great programs we have all these artists here, give us more money to build more prisons. So I said I was quitting. So I went to work in the county jail at that time, which is right over here somewhere in San Bruno. And at that time, the sheriff's name was Mike Hennessy, who I liked. And when I was working there, there was a herd of 8 live bison. Even now, it just blows my mind. I mean, these bison live in jail. They came from Golden Gate Park, and you all know there's a herd there. And what happened at that time, there was some consideration that herd had bovine tuberculosis. And what that means is that if they have that, they have to pull the herd off the land, right? And these are airborne bacteria. The bacteria falls to the ground, and they die, and you bring the herd back. But they brought this herd out there, and the herd seemed to be happy. So when I was teaching out there, I was driving down the jail, and I see this herd there. It was really weird. I mean, here's this herd where, 200 years ago, there were 60 million of them running around in the Midwest, almost hunted to extinction. And now, there's some of them penned up for their survival. And literally, right next door is a jail where people are penned up for your survival. So I thought that clash of images would be interesting. So I decided I'd build 100 of them. So that's what I did. So with myself and in the jail, some of the inmates had movements so they could help me do this. So we staked them out there, and curiously enough, this piece got popular. Tour buses came out to see these bisons out in the jail. I use audio a lot, so there was an audio component which was part of this. And the audio was the sound of a bison, 3 big bison stampedes, sound like a heartbeat, bum, 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 bum. The ambient sounds of jails, metal doors slamming, keys jangling. An interview with the zoo director making his comments about zoos being jails for animals. And then a friend of mine who did the audio played, "Oh, give me a home with buffalo." So that looped on this thing. So that was that piece there. So as I'm talking, if you have questions, you should just interrupt me or say something, because otherwise I'll ramble on a little bit. When I went to Texas, which I had mentioned about the death country, I did a piece called The Waiting Room down there, which is a large installation. And it was very, very, I have a book here which is for sale, and I'll sign them afterwards if you want. But The Waiting Room was a piece down there which I built a replica of a waiting room. You know, and I hung to define the space these long lead scrolls, which I stenciled on them your behavior, which is proscribed in the waiting room. So you see some of these signs around here. Sit up straight. Do not put your head or hands on another person's lap. Keep your hands inside at all times. No excessive kissing. I made none of that up. That was from the Visitor's Handbook. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice Handbook. I simply copied it. And then at that time, their last meals were available. So part of it, I got a series of last meals. And I made them out of lead. Okay, and some of these you can see there's little flicks of gold in there. And I've used gold leaf a lot in many pieces. And I used lead and gold leaf together because those are the traditional materials of alchemy. That the alchemists believe you take a base metal like lead and you put it through alchemical changes and it becomes something more complex, more pure, more refined, like gold. So I want to suggest that. And so it's just sprinkled in here. So these are some of the last meals. This person could decline, which they have the right to. You can decline your meal, and they can order something from Paris if they felt like it. Anything that people would ask me what I was doing. I mean, you know, I couldn't eat. I'm a burrito guy, so I probably just order a burrito. So these are the meals, and they're all made of lead. You know, pizza, onion rings. I'm really good with stuff. I couldn't get mashed potatoes right. I'm really good with this kind of stuff. Corn on the cob. Here's a burrito. You know, a burger, a napkin, piece of cheese. So these are the actual last meals. I simply made them. I didn't make any of this up.
Question?
Yes.
Can you order a couple shots of scotch?
You know, that's a good question. It depends. The business hand will say no, but if you're in the room with your attorney and your parents, your mother, whoever's there, and and the CEO, the correctional officer is cool, you can do it, but it's against the regulations.
Actually, I have a question regarding why the environment of jail strikes you so much.
Why what?
This environment of jails is so striking to you and so influential for your art, because I'm into yoga and I know an instructor that volunteered to teach in San Quentin prison. And a lot of people believe that already society is structured in a way that you are in prison for some extent, right? So the jail is probably the ultimate prison, where you actually have very limited freedom of motion, thinking. As the sign says, you can't even kiss your loved ones, you gotta keep your hands inside because you could do something extreme.
Yeah.
So my question is, why are you so touched by this? What is the primal motive that you done so much about this environment, you know?
Yeah.
Is it something personal that strikes you or that moves you from within?
I just felt enormous anger.
Okay.
I was really pissed at it. You know, that, there's a great, I don't know if this is like this, I live in the city, and there was a great billboard I saw on South Van Ness driving north. Okay, and it was on the west side of the street, and there was a split billboard. On one side it said $63,000, $500 for one inmate for 1 year in state prison. On the other side it was $9,200 for one student for 1 year in education. So nobody should be surprised if a kid goes into a grocery store and shoots somebody for food because they can't read. And you shouldn't be shocked at that. So, I still feel a sense of anger. I'm older and tired now, so I can't do the same thing. But that's what fueled me,